Hopefully you caught part 2 because now we're going to talk about stacking and MLB on both DraftKings and FanDuel. It's part 3 of this Advanced Fantasy Baseball series, and we're starting right now. What's up, guys? Joe Holka here. Welcome to another daily fantasy sports and betting video. If this is your first time here and you want to become a profitable DraftKings player and get better at betting, start now by subscribing to the channel. Make sure you click that notification bell so you don't miss anything along the way. If you're already a Holkamaniac, you know what to do. Smash that like button and we'll get rolling. We are going to jump into some stacking strategies, how we should be using them, and where we should be targeting these type of plays. It's a way to kind of leverage ownership. It's a way to make sure that you're getting those plate appearances, and kind of when you're right, you really kind of benefit from that. I think one thing that stacking has in almost any sport, right? It's like I'm trying to be right about a few things. I know I'm not going to be right about everything. So if I'm just picking and choosing these little mini stacks, I would almost guarantee that I'm going to be wrong in at least one of those spots. And to get to the top of a GPP, you really need to have a stack go completely off. So what are your thoughts on stacking with baseball? Is it bad that everyone's doing it now, or is it still probably optimal in a lot of ways?
It's still optimal.
Yeah.
There's enough people not doing it that's essentially like bringing the rake down a little bit. But that lessens each and every year. So you need to find different ways to be different. At early on in DFS, stacking was the way to be different because not everybody was kind of taking advantage of trying to predict their lineups for or fit their lineups for the appropriate contest. So in GPPs, you really do want to focus on stacking. And the reason being, as you said, Joe, you're not going to be able to predict everything right on a given slate. But if you can predict a few of the teams that score the most runs or generate the most opportunities on a slate, you are going to stack up a pretty big opportunity advantage on your opponents. And that's the big thing in MLB that's just a huge difference because you will see sometimes hitters get 6 plate appearances in a game. And that can be at times 50% or 25% more or 30% more than your opponent in terms of opportunity. In a lot of other sports, it's hard to generate that kind of opportunity advantage compared to your peers simply because there's more of those opportunities to be had in other sports. And so they get a little bit more condensed around the top players. With baseball, because everybody in the same lineup generally gets the same close to the same amount of plate appearances, you can stack up an edge where a lineup that has a team that scores like 10 to 15 runs might generate 4 or 5 more plate appearances as a whole when you add all those players up compared to a team that might score 4, 5, or 6 runs.
Yeah, for people that are coming over from NBA, it's basically like NBA overtime on steroids. Yep. A lot of times. So there's nothing worse than thinking you have some really good MLB lineups, and then there's just this random West Coast game that ends up going 14 innings. Like, just the worst. So there's a lot of different kind of ways you can go about stacking. FanDuel, obviously, you can only have 4-man stacks. DraftKings, 5-man stacks are in play, but you have to have at least 3 different teams. So talk a little bit about some of the different types of stacks before we kind of get too deep into it.
Yeah, so I think this is one of the things that's interesting about the strategy around MLB DFS now is trying to figure out, okay, now we know stacking is good, but like what's the optimal amount of stacking? And I think Manny does a lot of good analysis around that, and I'm sure he'll have a lot of good thoughts on that. I think more than anything, what you want to be considering with stack sizes is how efficient is it relative to salary in terms of what it does to the rest of your lineup. Because if you like 5-man stack Boston and you're trying to go like 1 through 5 or Colorado in Coors Field, you need to have the representative value on the slate to kind of make that work.
Right.
Otherwise, you're really, really going up against it because you're probably stacking a team that's not going to be super low owned. And
Sure.
You're now trying to figure out how to beat them with the other kind of salary relief plays when there aren't many on the slate. So I think stack size for me often is more about the team's value relative to their price tag and relative to the slate and how available they are. And then what I can create in the other portion of that stack. Because even if you're doing like a 5-man stack on DraftKings, you still have 3 more hitter spots to fill.
Right.
And generally, you want to correlate those spots. And so if you're going with like the most expensive 5-man stack, you probably need to find a cheap 3-person stack that you better feel comfortable with in terms of utilizing. So I think stack sizes should often correlate to the depth of the lineup and their price tags. And then the other thing that I'd say is if I feel like there's a few really good hitters on a slate that aren't on a team that I'm super excited to stack, I will be more likely to do stacks like on FanDuel of a 4-3-1, a 5-2-1. So I can get that one-off hitter that I feel like is a really good play, but I might not like his team on the whole. And there's definitely situations where I'll try to take advantage of that. I'm trying to think of like a good example of a team that I might not have loved the team, but I like an individual player. Sometimes it's Trout.
Yeah.
Sometimes on the Mets, like Michael Conforto is a guy that I've always liked taking when he's facing right-handed pitching. And I want to make sure that I get some of those guys into my lineup. So I might be more willing to forego a little bit of correlation for one of those hitter values to be able to get them into my lineups.
Something I've been doing in NHL too. So like, yeah, so like in MLB, like a 5-2-1, like I think that being good at one-offs is a significant skill as well. So like I actually think that I have a pretty big edge in NHL right now with my one-off decisions. So like I'm more willing to do that to be a little bit different with my one-off. But one thing that I do like to do with one-offs as well is be on like one side, like barbell approach, like either a pretty expensive guy, you mentioned like Mike Trout, or go with a very cheap value guy who I think is either maybe he's first or second and he has some type of thing that breaks his projection a little bit.
It almost works that way naturally too, because a lot of times when you're stacking a team, usually they're an expensive team or they're a cheap team. And so you kind of have those opportunities like naturally built in, because a lot of the prices on individual players within the same lineup do correlate a bit.
Yeah, you don't need to just line up every player one after another. I mean, if you look at a big inning that a team has, it's not like each guy in a row gets all the points. I mean, really more likely one guy's going to walk, the next guy's going to hit, the next guy's going to home run. It's not like it's 5 home runs in a row. So don't feel like, oh, I have the 2 and 3 hitter, I have to play the 4 hitter over the 5 hitter in your stack. That's really not how that works out.
How much better is 5-man stacks than 4-man stacks, or really how close is it? And I think that's where people kind of draw the line. They see 5-man stacks win, say 20 or 30 more times than 4-men did. And they think 5-man is the end-all be-all when there's a ton of value in 4-man stacks. Obviously, depending on slate size, which is something people don't take into account too. So many different factors contribute to how I create my MLB lineups and how I try to achieve upside. Stack size is one, batting order is one, just one of many things we covered.
By the way, guys, if you ever found value in any of my videos or live streams, one of the best ways to support what I'm doing here for free is to throw me the follow over on Twitter. And if you're new to the community, I also do a ton of content that's exclusive only to Instagram, so make sure you take a few seconds and follow me over there. I would really appreciate it. Keeping an eye on batting order and MLB when those finally go live from the beat writers is extremely important, and obviously it's a big part of what we're doing with our stacks.
We tackled some batting order stuff. I think we've seen across many different articles, publications, books, how important batting order is to a stack, right? And what position or spot in the batting order you should target in your stacks. We have all the numbers here from all the 170 slates he went over. I think that's super important. I think people, when they see the 1% owned number 9 hitter go for 35, then they think they should play number 9 hitters every single day, when that clearly is not the case with the numbers in front of you now. There's different things that people just blindly think because of 1 or 2 slates that really just help you not be profitable in the long term. It's kind of where if I can go back to football for a second, I always mention don't play bad players, because they'll do fine 1 week, but that 1 week isn't the reason you should play them every single week. They're going to do bad 10 weeks out of 11, with the 11th being the outlier. And then you think, oh man, but he had the 0.5% owned guy. I need to play a 0.5% owned guy in every one of my lineups. You go do that and tell me how that works out for you. You know, it's just not that. So I really like the batting order part.
This whole idea of playing good players in MLB, but just like having guys that are going to get more plate appearances, like that's essentially our volume in MLB anyway, right? Is trying to get, like, if you get one more batting appearance from these 1 through 5 hitters relative to some of these 6 through 9 guys, like I think this is really interesting to look at, just because, like you said, like people see like the random 7-8 hitter go off, you automatically think that maybe that's where you get different, and that's probably not exactly where you get different. Just want to take a second and thank everyone that has taken advantage of the one-on-one coaching sessions. It's really a great first step in investing in yourself. But if you prefer to kind of learn in a group setting, totally fine. What a lot of people don't realize, if they already have an Amazon Prime account, which a lot of people do, you automatically have access to a free Twitch Prime subscription. So make sure you're taking advantage of that. You get access to our premium Discord chat, as well as a bunch of other subscriber-only perks. And you're really just doing yourself a disservice if you're not in on those live streams, because that's where a lot of the teaching happens. So go over to twitch.tv/Joe Holka and throw me the follow so you don't miss when I go live. I think one of the most polarizing topics surrounding stacking is, should we be adding our pitcher to our stacks? And if it just happens organically, should we make sure this doesn't happen? So it's a really interesting topic. Excited to dive in.
I don't think you need to do that in MLB, where you're not necessarily stacking or pairing the pitcher with your stack or whatever. Maybe it works sometimes, but I definitely don't do it on purpose. It's not a floor thing. A pitcher by himself can definitely get the points he needs by just striking out guys and going through innings without getting a win. A win, yeah, it helps, but it's not as valuable as it is in hockey, I'd say.
The question I had specifically for qualifiers and some of these more top-heavy GPPs, do you ever find yourself adding in a pitcher to your stack? Like, that's something we do a ton in hockey. Obviously, the salary difference in goalies is a lot tighter than it is at pitcher, but is that something that you typically do? Because I mean, I know hitting environment is such a big thing in general. So like, if you're stacking with your pitcher, I would assume that it kind of negatively correlates in that way, because hopefully your batters are not in as good of a hitting situation then. So how do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's another thing where if it's organic and if it just happens naturally, I'm not against it. But yeah, like you said, a lot of times with baseball too, if the other team is dropping, 15 runs in the first 3 or 4 innings, there's a decent probability that the starting pitcher might not get his full allotment of innings. The manager's going to pull him and give him 10 to 15 pitches less than maybe he would have gone. So I think there is some negative correlation there. And like you said, with the park as well, if we're targeting an environment for offense, there's a good chance that the other side is probably in a good offensive spot as well. So I'd say that's something that if I had to put a percentage to it, it probably happens for me organically,
Sure.
3 to 4 to 5% of the time. If it's, Scherzer and I want to stack the Nats or something like that, that's can't miss. But overall, it's not something I ever go out of my way to target.
Yeah, like take, for example, Coors Field is the easiest one to explain. Yeah. Just because I love my stack in Coors Field doesn't mean I'm going to love my pitcher in Coors Field. I think you're totally right about that. Yeah, even then, the win isn't nearly as valuable. And then even if it is, there's so many other factors involved into getting a win for a pitcher that it's very tough to just blindly predict, right? You can go 6 innings and the next 3 innings can be a totally different story. There goes your win, right? I mean, it's also really risky when you're talking baseball. Not that stacking isn't risky, but you're adding another level of risk with your pitcher as well. So there's so many negatives, I'd say, with actually pairing a pitcher if you're doing it on purpose with every single one of your lineups, to the point that I probably wouldn't recommend. Have I seen instances where it does work? Yeah, of course, it's going to happen. But it's not something you actively try to do with most of your lineups. I think that's just either one, too much risk, or just, I don't know. It's just too much downside.
Before we get back at it, if you like my work and you want to support my work, the #1 way you can do so for free is by bookmarking my Amazon link and remembering to use it in your day-to-day shopping, because what you buy literally doesn't matter at all as long as Amazon brings you to the homepage. It's all that matters. So you're doing your part to support the channel. So let me know if you decided to join the Amazon crew in the comments, and I'll give you a shout out on the next video. So I think something that doesn't get talked about enough in the stacking conversation is, what do we put around our stacks? These one-off plays, should they be our value plays? Should they be guys that we're really trying to grab low ownership on? This is a really interesting kind of topic when it comes to stacking, so I'm really excited to show you guys what we found out.
7, 8, and 9 hitters. You saw the numbers. They're not really that good. So when do you play them? Because people do win with them. I actually studied this one for the last 2 weeks, and I didn't give this one away.
You want to let me guess first? So
Sure.
I think that it's either if there's late news or weather type issue where you just get super low ownership on them, or potentially playing them together so that you have like the 7, 8, 9, and you have that extra correlation. Am I anywhere near what the answer is?
You are close with the second part. Okay. Yeah, you only play 7, 8, and 9 hitters, or the most optimal way to do this is you play 7, 8, or 9 hitters. You don't play them all together, but you play them in the stack only. Don't use them as fillers.
Sure.
Fillers doesn't make sense. If you're just going to hope for a 9th inning or a 9th guy home run, doesn't make sense. 9, 7, 8, and 9 guys perform better when the stacks perform better. They're usually not very good one-off guys at all.
That's really, that's
so
super
you get more points from them is the more points is simple. More at bats, right? Mm-hmm. More at bats equals more chances for points. In order for that to happen, the stack needs to be doing well. If there's a bunch of 1, 2, 3 innings in front of him, he'll have the minimum amount of at bats. Not really that profitable in the long term. Play them in stacks only. That will help in the long term, 100%.
So based on the slate size, should we be doing things differently with our stacking? Maybe smaller stacks, maybe not stacking at all? Is there ever an argument for stacking less in smaller slates? I guess so. I've heard Bales talk about this before too, just because on the smaller slates, like to be different, sometimes stacking less is a good way to get lower ownership as a combined roster.
Yeah, for sure. I think we briefly touched on it when we kind of went over the article. But yeah, the smaller the slate size, and you can see it with something with this article, is 4-mans and 3-mans to an extent become much more viable the less options there are, right? Because in your lineup, it's kind of simple to see. It's instead of doing a 5-3 where you take up all hitter spots in your DFS lineup with stacks. 4-3s, you take up one less hitter spot, so you have a random filler in your lineup. But if you want to go 4-2s or just 4 and just 4 other fillers, you can do that as well too. In 4-game slates, 5-game slates, 6-game slates, there's a very good chance that not one team in there posts more than 10 or 12 runs. There's a solid chance for that.
Yep.
Even if they do, the ability to have a 4-man stack in all your lineups still gives you the option to have that team and have the upside they bring with a 12-run game. So you're not missing out on much, but you're also capping your downside from being too negative as well, if that makes sense, right? So there's just not enough options the smaller the slate is. So don't go all in on just individual teams and cap your lineup.
If you want to learn more about how to become a profitable daily fantasy sports player and how to get better at betting, start now by hitting that subscribe icon in the bottom right-hand corner so you don't miss anything. Have a ton of DFS courses on demand for free here on YouTube for other sports as well, so be sure and check those out. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.